Marxist historian, scholar, comedian, Mark Steele. Speaking, I believe, at Marxism 2005.
So, was the Bolshevik Revolution a coup? Was it a coup? Some people say that it was. For instance, Robert Service. Now, he's not just any old sort of character. Robert Service is a historian who had a television programme about the Russian Revolution about a year ago, sort of, quite often if there's anything about the Russian Revolution that needs to be in the newspapers, there Robert Service will be. He's the expert. Ring him up. He's the person who knows all about it. And during this television programme, for instance, that he did about the Russian Revolution, he said that the reason that the Russian Revolution happened in October 1917 was because Lenin knew that he was ill. And therefore, he wanted to have the revolution now because he wasn't sure about his health in the near future. That was why it happened. The way that this is the idea. The way that sort of, as if he had the revolution the same way that sort of old people say, well, I better go to the Lake District this year because I might not get another chance. That was why it happened. He was ill. So let's have it now. If he'd been healthy, bollocks, I've got years left yet, so I'll have a couple of years more drinking before we have the revolution. And so on. A man called Pipes. Again, one of the most sort of foremost historians, they would introduce him as, I'm sure. The October Revolution was the model of a modern coup d'etat. Why do they say this, first of all, before I get on to the more important thing of what do they mean by it and why do I not think it's right? But why do they say this? Because it really is a coup of a small number of people that they want to prove that it was just a small number of people, outside agitators, the same as it always is, anything. They can't believe that the mass of people are actually intelligent enough to organise things for themselves, to be angry. People don't know that they're not clever enough, the masses, to know that they're angry by themselves. It's because a few middle-class intellectuals have come and said, you ought to be angry about this, and they suddenly think, oh, all right, seems fair enough, I'll go and have a revolution. That's the idea, outside agitators. And, of course, also with the Russian Revolution to prove that there is not just a link, there is a common thread, that it is one and the same. The Stalinist dictatorship that people know about, and Lenin and the origins of the Russian Revolution, they're one and the same sort of thing. Always an astonishing attitude, you know, that Lenin and Stalin were the same thing from these historians who seem to have missed one simple flaw, it seems to me, in their argument when Lenin and Stalin being the same thing. If they're the same thing, why is it then that one side had all the other side shot? That, it seems to me, indicates a difference of opinion of some significance. That Stalin had all the Leninists, virtually all the leading Leninists, all the old Bolsheviks, he had them shot. And yet, the Lenin side, really, they're supposed to be the people who caused it all. These are the people who created it all. They're it's the only time when the victims, you know, the Leninists were the first victims of Stalinism, and yet they're supposed to be the people who caused the crime. It seems to be a sort of bit of a misunderstanding, a bit upside down, as if these people, if they were sort of called to a murder inquiry, they'd look at the poor bloke who'd been murdered and say, it's him, he caused it. Stop him before he gets away, that's the bastard. February Revolution. I mean, worth going over just in, I won't go over it in great detail, but the February Revolution, what happened? In a course of 5 days, masses of people suddenly came out onto the streets. So they're sick of the war. 7 million people had died in the First World War under the Tsarist regime had led the Russian people into. Over a course of 5 days, most extraordinary sort of upheaval took place, with this 300-year-old dynasty collapsed, with the Tsar being led into a railway siding by railway workers, couldn't even get back to the capital that he was supposed to be defending. Working class, the factory workers in Petrograd, the capital, took to this extraordinary habit of getting their managers and tying them to a wheelbarrow and tipping them in the local river, and so on. The soldiers burnt down their barracks, and with the officers in them fleeing out the windows, and so on and so forth. You do a whole meeting on the extraordinary events of the 5 days of the February Revolution. And then, therefore, there was this new regime, a new regime which really had two governments, in a sense, because the February Revolution threw up this whole new institution, the Soviets. It was the Soviets, the organisations of the workers, of the peasants, and in the army, which really controlled the day-to-day life of society. The factories, in every factory you elected people to be the delegates to a Soviet. In the army, the soldiers elected people to be the head of their particular soldier Soviets. The peasants, exactly the same. And yet, then in Petrograd, each delegate then elected people to the head of the Soviet. There was 500 people who were part of the head of the Soviet, and so on. So they ran day-to-day life of society, but they weren't the government. There was also another government, if you like, the provisional government, a collection of old capitalists, people that were uneasy about the Tsar, wanted more democratic reforms and so on. These people who formed the provisional government. That was the state of play then in February. Marvellous, we've got democracy, so Claire Shaw seems to be half right up till then. Except that, did the February Revolution bring in democracy? People expected it to. The main thing, of course, was the war. This was the main gripe in society, as it would be when 7 million people have died as a result of it. This was the main gripe. The February Revolution, did it sort it out? Far from sorting it out. See, they claimed they would. The provisional government said, yes, because of the revolution, we've now got this marvellous sort of new regime. Now the war will only be prosecuted to defend Russia's borders. Well, that's some sort of compromise, I suppose. Except that it didn't. Quite quickly, it was clear that new offensives were being launched into Turkey and so on that weren't just about defending Russia's borders. The death penalty was beside the army. Then there was a secret note discovered written by a man called Miliukov, who was the head of the provisional government to start with. A secret note where he said that although we'd said this to the Soviets, it was really just a lie, because we've got to extend the war effort with a new offensive into Turkey and so on. At the Mariinsky Palace, there was all the leaders, the European leaders of the war, the biggest warmongers, the sort of Tony Blairs of the day, were invited to the Mariinsky Palace in order to, treated with the great respect with which these people deserve in bourgeois circles, of course, to discuss the war effort. It was quite clear that there was nothing, there was no attempt at all to end the war from the provisional government. All the social policies, the peasants wanted land. This was one of the main reasons for the February Revolution. The peasants wanted land. Clearly that wasn't going to be the case. The press, organised by the provisional government, started issuing the most appalling slanders, particularly against the Kronstadt sailors, all the sort of things that, outside agitators, the scum of the earth, and all the sort of things that happen in these cases. The economy collapsed. Prices doubled. The profits of the very rich, Fabergé and so on, they ended up getting richer and richer. It didn't seem to solve anything whatsoever. Even on the most basic level, the Tsar and his family had been put in jail. So, all right, well, they're put in jail. That at least is something. That, I suppose, was the equivalent of the minimum wage. When everybody says, well, you've not done anything, and they always come back, but we're not the same as the Tories, we've got the minimum wage. And so the February Revolution could say their version of that was, well, but the Romanovs are in jail, at least you've got that. And they were in jail, but they were in a peculiar sort of jail. This was the people they were in jail with. They were in jail, allowed to be with 6 chambermaids, 2 valets, 10 footmen, 3 cooks, 4 assistant cooks, a clerk, a nurse, a doctor, a butler, a wine steward and 2 pet spaniels. I'm sure anyone who's been to Wormwood Scrubs would recognise it. When the Bolsheviks, obviously, when they did take power, they removed all of these people, although they did apparently still allow to have their butler there, and I wonder if this was just a bit of sort of mischief, just the idea that, because then they were just living off black bread every day, and I just love the idea that the butler still came out and said, what are you having tonight, sir? The black bread again, be to your satisfaction, Mr. Romanov? So nothing then appeared to be any different. So, how does this sort of lead into the argument that the Bolshevik Revolution was a coup? Well, first of all, the first thing I think about it, the Bolshevik leaders, the people that led the Bolshevik Revolution, anything about their life up to then would lead you to think that really a coup would not be what they were about. They understood, as the revolution unfolded, the Bolsheviks understood that there was a dynamic of revolution taking place here, something that we can recognise today, really, that revolutions really come in a series of stages. Not the case that, there's a revolution, the old regime's gone, the new regime is here. Quite often it is the case that there is a mass uprising from below which appears to be supported by everybody. It clears out the government, clears out the leaders of the government, and then suddenly there's a euphoria that takes place. We've done it, we've overthrown the old regime, and everybody seems to support it. Bizarre sort of thing, Eastern Europe in 1989. Almost everybody seems to support this new regime. Now, you think, well, who have we overthrown then? Everybody. I mean, in the French Revolution that the Bolsheviks look back to, of course, that was exactly the case. Everybody supported, even Louis XVI. The epitome of the regime that they'd been overthrowing wore the liberty cap in the days after the red liberty cap, the flag of the revolution. I support the marvellous revolution that overthrew me. What a strange sort of... Now, of course, strange psychological business. Of course, secretly he was plotting, as he was plotting with the Austrians and so on to overthrow the revolution. He wasn't quite as keen on it as he made out and so on.